Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. We're going to get rocking and rolling on today's training about LinkedIn newsletter. But before we get started, I'd just like to say a thank you to those showing up early and on time by giving you a tip that I'll snip out later when I have replays, etc. But my tip for you today is to understand the difference between inbound and outbound marketing. And this goes to today's training around LinkedIn newsletters. That really leads to a lot of inbound activity. And so the difference between inbound and outbound really is proactive and reactive. So outbound is you picking up the phone and calling somebody. It's you knocking on a door. That's outbound activity. It's the activity that you proactively are doing. Inbound is when the customer is knocking on your door, when they're sending you requests to work with you, to learn more about your company, or to learn more about your specialty so they can start discussing. And when you think about the balance between inbound and outbound, especially in the federal market with federal buyers, hundreds of thousands of federal buyers out there, you're really barely going to touch on 1% of the potential buyer pool and industry teammates as well. Less than 1% will you be able to do in an outbound or proactive way. Inbound will have to cover down on the other 99%. And that means you need to be doing things that cover down on that aspect. I do a ton of training on marketing assets, et cetera, that you can put out there. But today's training is going to be about LinkedIn newsletters, and that's an inbound marketing asset. It's something you do that will generate interest in your company and what you have to talk about and drive people to come learn more about it from you. They will be coming in to your company to learn more. So that was just a quick tip for those of you showing up early and on time. I really appreciate that. When you do, LinkedIn puts the word out to everybody else and says, hey, we're getting started. Don't be late. So I appreciate you being here early, sitting in the front row and on the edge of your seat, because we got a lot of good, exciting training to do today. So let me just get my ducks in a row. By the way, thank you for putting your information or chatting in the chat, in the comments. Make sure you do that. I sometimes don't go back there, but we have over 200,000. We have over 200 people attending live right now. So if you put your company name in there and your core competency or the city and state you're in, it's like, hey, we're down by Liberty, North Carolina, or Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, right? That kind of thing. If you put that information into the chat, it allows other people to see it during the chat. They can scroll through it maybe while I'm teaching. But it also allows people to come in afterwards or after the training's over and go back and go, oh, let me follow up with person A and person B. They look like there might be a match for networking. I literally had somebody this morning reach out and say, hey, we're going after this opportunity. They're asking for this one component. We don't do that. Do you know somebody who might be able to fit on our team? I didn't even have time to get back to them. I just sent I forwarded their email to another person I thought could do it. I replied to all and I added this person I thought could do it. Their company could do it. And I said, hey, I think this person is. You guys talk. And I watched within 10 minutes, they got hold of each other and they said, one person said, yeah, we can absolutely help you. And the other said, well, let's get together on a call. And so within an hour or two, they were able to go from unknown to having a meeting. But it really came, that particular scenario came from me knowing about these two companies. I'm like, oh, you two should talk. And I want to be able to do that more and more. And I want you to be able to do that. I want you to look in the chat and see, well, hey, Dave Waltz. I was about to use Dave Waltz, but he's government buyer, not industry, but good to see you here. But if I come down and I look at like Megan Rock, for example, I can look in there and go, oh, Steel Toed. They do cybersecurity, assessment services, et cetera. And that's something that will stick in my mind. Okay, so let me get rocking and rolling on the formal part of the training. We're going to be talking about the LinkedIn newsletter. I've built a LinkedIn newsletter with almost 15,000 subscribers in the federal market. And it's the largest government contracting newsletter on LinkedIn. It's bigger than even DoD's newsletter itself. There are no newsletters that are out there that are bigger than mine. And I don't say that to brag. I say that as a qualification for why I'm here to teach you what I'm going to teach today. I believe you too can be building a newsletter. It doesn't have to be 15,000, but what if it was 100 or 1,000 subscribers who are in your market, federal buyers who come to your newsletter to learn about artificial intelligence or nursing and medical staffing or elevator services, whatever it is you do. What if they can come in there and learn and become aware of you? I just mentioned Dave Waltz. He's from the Navy, and you can look at his chat to see where specifically he is, but he puts into the chat, here's what we do. Here's what we're looking for. Here's how you can reach us. Here's an industry day we're having. He puts that stuff in, but remember, he's also here. And if he's here, he might on LinkedIn, he might also see your newsletter, and he might begin to go, oh, you know what? Somebody in my command might be interested in this newsletter because it is always talking about shipbuilding or whatever. So anyways, so it's important to be able to get out there and be visible on there. And that's why I tell you the size of the newsletter I built. And I'll show you my analytics where it steadily has been built. The way I have done this is through good content. I constantly look at my target audience, right? And ironically, Dave Waltz, the Navy guy, and you are my target audience. I'm trying to sit there and build up an organization that brings industry and government buyers together more, small business industry together more. I think one of the biggest reasons we don't have as much small business successes as we could have is really this lack of the buyer and the seller meeting each other. It's not because small businesses can't do it. You are an expert at what you do, and Dave and other buyers in the government would buy what you sell if they could find you and find your qualified procurement-ready business. And so when you think about my target audience, you're the ones I want to reach. I provide content that I know you would value. For example, how to create a newsletter in LinkedIn. You can do the same thing as well, right? I really believe that you can create a newsletter about your subject matter expertise, your core competency that your target audience will discover and begin to follow. And that's how they begin to know, like, and trust you. And I'll talk more about that in a second. The key thing about a newsletter, which is fun for me, and I think a really good news for you, is that anybody can talk about a newsletter. Let me just pop the slides over here really quick. Anybody can talk about a newsletter, but no one's going to do the work. That's the thing about a lot of these ideas and doing a newsletter. I see people come in and out all the time where they do a couple of articles and they bail because they don't have a huge amount of success or because it's tough writing the newsletter. But if you're okay with picking up a task like this and being pretty steady at it, then you're going to have similar success that I have. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So in today's training, we're going to be talking about how to attract federal buyers with LinkedIn newsletter. I'll do a separate training, or I might even do a separate course and that I'll talk to you about in a minute. I'm still trying to decide on that. But the reality is I'm not trying to teach you so much the step-by-step today in LinkedIn, right? That's there and I can show you that. What I want to teach you is how to attract federal buyers. That's what you really want, right? No matter what your business is, if you can get federal buyers and teammates in the government contracting space to be able to subscribe to your newsletter, then you're going to rock and roll on increasing your inbound leads and increasing your marketing. Frankly, I even think the government should be doing newsletters just like this. I would love to help Dave and others in the Navy or throughout the government create newsletters as well that get read by industry. So industry's got more visibility on the Navy and other departments. But the three things I'm going to cover down on, and then I'm going to go into LinkedIn and show you a lot. First thing is why you should create that LinkedIn newsletter. If you don't know about it, I really want to just give you some ideas of why it's important. I already alluded to the inbound marketing reason. The second thing is step-by-step guide to starting your newsletter. I just want to give you some steps in there. And then I want to wrap up with a couple of tips that just tells you, how do I do this, right? I get people ask me all the time, how do you put out all this content? Well, first off, I only speak on what I really know and I like it, right? So that's fun. I really like sharing the information that I share. And so in that third bullet, I'm going to talk to you about how do I plan my newsletter articles so I can get this information out to you. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you. Before we get too far into this, make sure that, we're talking about a newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, it's Government Contracting Success Newsletter. And then the other thing is I wanted to thank those of you who signed up or registered for training today. I think we had like 140 people register for training. Right now, we're getting close to 300 people who are live. So I love this, right? We're having double the amount of people who registered. But when you do register, it's a simple thank you to our team because you let us know you're coming. We can kind of track on the analytics, and we appreciate that thank you. The other thing is that LinkedIn is able to push that information out to others on LinkedIn saying, well, if John and Jane and Sally are all attending these trainings, LinkedIn has algorithms that will identify other people and let them know, hey, this is going on. So thank you for registering for training. We do training every single weekday Got a couple of more this week. So go register for tomorrow's training. And maybe Gus, my partner, will put that into the chat, like tomorrow's training. So you can click on that and go register. Okay, so let's talk briefly about why you should create a LinkedIn newsletter. And it's interesting. First off, I'm curious on just really quick whether any of you have thought about creating a newsletter. Obviously, you're here, so you're thinking about it. But were you thinking about creating it? Do you already have a newsletter? Put that into the chat. Just let me know. I already have a newsletter, or I want to create a newsletter, or I'm just exploring whether it's the right idea for me. So when you think about sales, the important thing to remember is that people buy from those they know, like, and trust. People buy from those they know, like, and trust. When you put a newsletter in place, you're going to be able to help with all three of those elements of know, like, and trust. The newsletter, as it gets more popular and more subscribers, will be pushed out to more people who will then discover you, and they'll begin to learn about you. As they read your content, that's where they start trusting you. First off, they can look at the message and they can trust the message. When I put out content, I often put out content that says, hey, go do this, this, this in order to achieve this result. And many people, you maybe have done this as well, go do this, 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 and you achieve the result that I'm talking about. So that builds your trust in me. And then as you see more and more of this, you start liking me because you're like, oh my God, this guy's so cool. He shares content. I don't know if cool is what you say, but like, I appreciate this guy. Okay, the second thing is on why you should create a LinkedIn newsletter is because LinkedIn is the only social media platform where federal buyers play. I don't care if there's people on Facebook or Twitter or whatever else is out there. LinkedIn is the only professional network. LinkedIn started out as kind of this whole resume way of thinking around their social media platform. And now they have pushed heavily into trying to own the professional social market or social media market or side, right? No one else is doing that. No one else is even trying to do that. For example, Twitter is more just I think Elon Musk calls it the town center where people just come in and get on their soapboxes and go back and forth, which is fine, but that's different than what we want. We want to be able to reach buyers and buyers to reach us. The other thing LinkedIn is doing a lot with, and that's why LinkedIn newsletters are really good, is that when you do a newsletter on LinkedIn, they actually email it because they, not us, but they have everybody's email addresses. And so they email out that newsletter to a large portion of your subscribers and sometimes to other people saying, you might be interested in this issue of the newsletter. And the idea from LinkedIn's perspective is they're trying to pull people back into the platform. So they're very committed to doing this. And going back to federal buyers, right? Millions of federal buyers, and think about how many people are in the federal government. I've done lots of training. Recently, I've done a lot of posts on how many people are actually in each agency, where you start looking at 400,000 here or a million here. Adds up pretty fast, right? And there are millions of these federal buyers out there with accounts. And some of them have heavy usage, and some of them barely have an account, right? Like I've gone to small business specialists where they're not there, where Dave Waltz, who's in our training today, he's on LinkedIn often. He uses it as part of the toolbox or tool sets for his job. And so federal buyers have begun to come to trust this, right? When we look at other social platforms, we don't really trust it as much. But I have seen CISOs and CIOs, chief data officers, and other leaders within an organization. Those are all IT type people, right? I've seen them come in and have discussions and dialogues around their needs in here. It's not just coming in and saying, hey, we got an opportunity, come back and respond to our RFI or RFP or something, but it's buyers coming in and just talking about technology or construction or whatever it is. And so you really want to focus on that. And the last thing I mentioned already was it will increase your inbound traffic. When you have a newsletter out there and it begins to become trusted as a source for this one type of information, like artificial intelligence, elevator services, whatever, when it starts getting trusted, then the very intended audience, or the audience that you intend to read it, will begin to be attracted to it. And then you'll see an increase of people reaching out to you saying, well, hey, can you come talk to us about this additive manufacturing article that you wrote or direction? I put this bell curve in just very quickly. I just wanted to point out that when you have any of these kind of conversations, people might say, you want to have a newsletter on your website, you want to have people on Facebook or whatever. Forget about all that kind of messaging, right? First off, just stick with my training today in the way I'm saying it. But keep in mind, when I'm talking about people on LinkedIn, 50%, this bell curve basically says 50% of the people on the left-hand side here are going to do what you want. They're going to subscribe to your newsletter, they're going to appreciate it, et cetera. And another 50% are not going to do it. They're going to prefer a different platform, or they're going to be on LinkedIn, but they're not really going to be engaged. And this is a really important thing to always remember about anything you do, especially as you start a newsletter on LinkedIn, is that only 50% of the intended audience is even going to track on you and consider subscribing or engaging, et cetera. I have a very engaged audience, but in the government contracting space, the federal market, we are a reserved audience. We do not give a lot of thumbs up or a lot of content. We are the audience that watches you put out posts for years and go, oh my God, I've loved your stuff. I've watched it for years, but I've never engaged. Like, you're killing me. But that's just a truism about the federal market. And so if you pay attention to that, you'll be good to go. Here, I just wanted to give some steps, and then I'm going to go into LinkedIn and show you really quickly newsletters, et cetera. But the first thing, if you're going to start a LinkedIn newsletter, make sure you have the feature available. You have to have at least 150 subscribers or excuse me, connections. The second thing is you have to have posted some content. So before you can start a newsletter, you need to have posted some content just on your feed that is sharing valuable content out there that people begin to engage. Again, it doesn't have to go viral. It doesn't have to be any of that. But LinkedIn wants to see that you already are doing that. So as you move forward, that feature will become more and more available. The second thing is as you create a LinkedIn newsletter, it's really important to have a title that is not creative. People are not creative when they quickly look at something. You know, if we go to a gallery, we might look at art and creative stuff there and really take our time to understand that. But when we're looking at a list of newsletters or we see a newsletter title, if it doesn't tell us immediately what it is, then it kind of goes away. So for example, my newsletter title is Government Contracting Success. You either like it or don't. You either instantly pull to it or you're not. And that's what I want for yours as well. You know, everything about elevators. That pretty much is a really clear title that somebody like me might go, I'm not going to subscribe, right? But somebody who is in the facility management in the government might say, let me track on that. We buy elevator services. So make sure your title is really easy to understand and that there's a description that lays out that same title thread, right? This is what we're going to be talking about. So this fourth bullet, and I apologize for not numbering this to make it easier, but the fourth bullet, and this is my tip for you, right, is before you start a newsletter, because I see people make mistakes with newsletters all the time. They come out of the gate too fast. And before I talk about that bullet, let me just tell you what I mean, is when you create a newsletter and you say, start, right, publish my first newsletter, LinkedIn does you a favor and they reach out to your entire network and basically invite your entire network to come subscribe to your newsletter. You don't want to do that before you're ready. So when people subscribe to it, you want to make sure you've got that good title and description. You feel good about that. You get a little thumbnail, and that's pretty easy to do. But you write, my suggestion, this fourth bullet is write 3 articles. And so in LinkedIn, you can write a newsletter article or you can write just a standalone article. Not to go too far into it, but what I'm suggesting is you write 3 standalone articles that you like, and I'll talk a bit about that in a second, but you write 3 articles so you have them sitting in your draft folder within LinkedIn. When you're ready to launch your newsletter and you're like, okay, I'm ready to go, my recommendation is to take one of those articles out and just copy the content and go over to your newsletter and paste it into your newsletter, clean it up a teeny bit if it needs to be cleaned up. And then on Monday morning, launch it. So Monday morning, 8 o'clock or something, local time, go ahead and launch that newsletter out there. And that way LinkedIn is pushing it out. When you write 3 articles, you already have the next 2 weeks lined up. So then you're 2 weeks, 3 weeks almost ahead of the next publishing schedule. And you're not putting pressure on yourselves. I feel like people sometimes put too much pressure on themselves to write a novel or something. It's like, you don't have to. You just need good information or tips for the audience that you're trying to reach. So post on Monday mornings. I post all around, but I'm a different player, right? I've been doing this a long time and I know what I can do, but to manage your time, posting Monday mornings is a good steady thing to get into a cadence. And later you can decide, like 6 months later, you can decide where to go. And then the last thing I put here was build an audience by showcasing somebody else's material. So an example is if I'm building an audience around elevator services, I might reach out to Otis Elevators and grab some of their content and say, hey, I read this great article. Here's 3 top tips and you can go learn more here or something. I can put in my own tips and reference it. Another way of showcasing an audience is I might want to highlight the Department of Defense, or I want to attract more people from the Navy to my content. Well, I might showcase what's going on in a particular area. Like one of my favorite things to do is to share industry days. I just shared it this morning, or maybe it was yesterday morning. I get confused. But I just shared an industry day set of slides. So I attract a lot of people, but I also attract the federal agency folks who did that industry day. They appreciate that I'm pushing it out. Don't you do it because you're not trying to get the same audience as me, but think about the audience in the federal buying shop or program office that you're trying to reach. And sometimes you can showcase that office or showcase those people. You know, I did a one with the CIO of the Army. I'm like, hey, the CIO of the Army, tag John somebody or other, I can't remember his name, but I tag him. And then I said, he put out this information. It was great. Here's the top 5 things I got from his speech or whatever. And then he comes in and engages with me on it, which is awesome. I've had high-level leaders within the government come engage on my content. I don't try to sneak them in. I'm not trying to spam them or overly tag them. But if I showcase them when it makes sense, you slowly are building your audience, and you can do that out there. Okay, so let me just switch over really quick into LinkedIn. I just want to show you my newsletter, and I'm going to try to move fairly fast, just in the interest of time, because I end at 12:30 here. But the idea of the LinkedIn newsletter is that when you come in, you see the title that I have right here. I say, win more federal contracts by following our 7-step process, etc. And you can see our subscribers. The articles are really straightforward articles that I'm looking to do. Federal agency budgets. Here I was doing, this is a weekly newsletter I do, but here I'm talking about how to register in the Army's database for what they're doing. Here I'm talking about FPDS. So these are all things I'm trying to target. And when you look at, let me come back up here. If we look at analytics, and your analytics go up and down, but I just want for you to see this, right? Is that if you just look at, let's just say the last year and see what the results were. I know the last 90 days were like, because I tracked 90 days, but just showing you the last year, right? So if you look at last year, I just added 7,000 subscribers. So 16% more than I did the year before. And that's huge. And I'm picking up, 400,000 article views just on my newsletter. This is huge. When you think about trying to reach your buyer and that inbound traffic I'm talking about, you really get a lot of traction. You can see right here where there's these dips in my analytics. The reason there's these dips is because I took a vacation, or I got sick, or I just didn't feel like doing an article. When I don't do something, I don't get as much traffic. But when I do stuff, like you can see all here in the beginning of 24, pretty much. And I think I got sick right there at the beginning of February. But you can see all this steady traffic, a lot of traffic on subscribers coming in, and people taking a look at this stuff. Also, that's actually views, but you can see the pattern. I'm also able to see who's coming in, who's looking at what I'm doing. And so as I look in here, I can see who my subscribers are. Am I reaching the target audience? One of my favorite ones is to look at the company. Am I reaching the companies I'm looking for? And I am, right? A huge portion of who's looking at my stuff are the large primes and agencies. I'm trying to help small businesses. And so I want larges and agencies to be attracted to our newsletter and to the GovCon chamber so that I can share their information to smalls, and I can help make intros from smalls to larges, et cetera. And so you can see a lot of good information that you start tracking. This is something I track very heavily. Obviously, I'm way overloaded on DC, Baltimore area, so Washington, DC area, but that's just because that's where I'm at. But I proactively reach into Atlanta and some of these other places. I'm proactively trying to go out to California and the West Coast and get small businesses that are out there attracted to our newsletter and our activity. I wanted to show you a way I sometimes look. Let me just do Navy really quick. The way I sometimes reach out here and look at finding newsletters that are out there so I can learn from them. And so if I just went into right here, let me just take this person so I do it randomly, right? But so this person here is research, development, and acquisition. On any single person you find, I can come down here and see what kind of newsletters. It's all the way at the bottom. I can come all the way down to their interests and see which newsletters they're belonging to, where I can maybe participate and reach these buyers. This is an example of how you might be able to get ideas for newsletters and to see what titles people have, the descriptions. Here's something called the supply chain huddle. If I just pick that one as an example, well, it's only got 2 things, but I can come in here and look and see who's doing stuff and what kind of articles they have, what kind of rhythm they have. What I want to talk to you just really quickly about, and I realize I got to come back and do a whole nother training, and I will. This is my first shot at trying to just talk about the newsletter, but I'll come back and do another one. But here's how I plan my LinkedIn newsletter articles, because I do it on the whiteboard. I spend an hour and I just plan out the next week or 2. And so I hit the board, but I'm always thinking about my audience. And so if you think about who would you want to be targeting, that's your audience. Who would you want to be targeting and reading your newsletter? It's not about having the most subscribers. It's just having a good amount of subscribers that are in your target audience, right? What would they value? So again, when I go back to thinking about elevator services, what they might value is a decrease in the cost of elevator maintenance on a regular basis. Or, if I think of Amazon Web Services and cloud migrations, et cetera, I might think about, the top 10 tips of migrating an application onto the cloud, things like that. If you know your audience and you know your core competency, then you should be able to come up with some topics. And so then I go on to my whiteboard, and there I'm just writing out a quick outline. Again, we sometimes make writing too much work. If I wanted to do AWS migration or artificial intelligence, how to get started, what I would do on my whiteboard is go, well, what are the 5 things? Here's 5 things to get started in artificial intelligence. And I would write them out. By the way, don't use ChatGPT. Don't use AI. I am just seeing a ton of it. And I'm not here to judge, but I am here to sit there and evaluate and say, it sucks. When I see it, I instantly go away from it. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not even looking at that stuff. But I can see when somebody puts their own spin on it. Steve Koprince has a newsletter out there. He's a lawyer who talks about the GovCon space. But I can see his personality all throughout his analysis of reports that he sees and lawsuits that happen within the GovCon world. That's what you want to be doing. Something like what I do and what he does, right? And don't use AI to write your stuff. Instead, go to a whiteboard or a piece of paper and just write out your expertise, right? You're an expert on something. What are the 5 things you would say? And then just write a couple of paragraphs about it. You're helping us move forward with that article. You're not trying to write something that's getting published in a famous magazine or a big magazine, right? You're just trying to create a newsletter article that teaches us a little bit every single week. And the last suggestion I have is you can pick a theme for multiple articles. So I might think about if you're migrating from Microsoft SharePoint on-prem to Microsoft SharePoint online, so servers on site to servers in the cloud, basically. If you're migrating, I might sit there and say, well, I want to write 5 articles. They, again, don't have to be these huge things, but the first article might be, so that's the theme, right? The first article might be what to consider before migrating, the top 10 risks on migrations, how to deal with your custom applications, how to deal with user adoption and satisfaction to make sure they're not dealing with problems, things like that, right? I would come up with different articles related to that one theme. If you can write a response or an RFI response or an RFP response to the government, then you can write these newsletter articles. This is ways of letting mass amount of people know about your expertise so they start discovering you. And going back to that idea of people buy from those they know, like, and trust, they can really track on that. So here, I just want to point out 3 things I want you to remember as you walk away. First off, just go check that you can even start a newsletter, right? And before you start that, though, pick a topic and an audience. Really understand that you want to talk about this thing, and this is the target audience I'm trying to reach. I'm trying to reach chief data officers, for example. And then before you launch that newsletter, make sure you write 3 articles that are out there so you can have them in draft format. And when you launch your newsletter, you're able to roll it forward. One of the things as I wrap up, I just want to mention this because as I go through this training, I'm going to do this training again. I might do it next week or the week after, so watch for this. But the next one I do, I'm actually going to do screenshots and walk you through creating a newsletter. I'm going to reach out to one of my customers and just say, hey, can I create a newsletter for you? But I want to show you the actual detailed steps in creating it and show you the growth of like a woman-owned small business government contractor from start to traction, to getting a subscriber base in there so that you can do this for your own company. Hey, as we move forward in the day, just remember government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. So is creating the newsletter. I'll see you in the next training.